are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin here, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. And this is our Scouting the Opponent episode where we'll talk about Miami's next opponent, which is the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Miami's looking to stay undefeated and continue their quest to make the college football playoff for the first time. Today, I've got joining me Kelly Quinlan from Jackets Online, also part of the Rivals.com network, to discuss the game. Thanks for joining me today, Kelly.
What's up, Marcus?
Nothing much, man. Just another beautiful day in paradise here. But Miami's traveling to Atlanta. First, I do want to ask, what's the weather like?
Yeah, it's funny. I just got back in town. It's like 60s, like nice out. I think it is supposed to rain on Saturday, or there's been some rain forecast. I'm not sure. I haven't actually looked at it. Earlier in the week, there was rain forecasted, so it was like 50% chance of like a little bit of rain. Wasn't anything like, torrential or anything. And certainly both these teams are used to dealing with a little bit of rain, so I don't think that would be particularly game changing. It's not going to be cold or anything, which would be the thing I think Miami people would be most worried about.
Yeah, absolutely. 60 degrees sounds lovely. I'm sure that sounds great for Miami Hurricanes fans and the team. Miami goes into this game looking to stay undefeated, like I said. Georgia Tech looking to become bowl eligible with just one more win. So obviously both teams really looking to get a win here. But it is homecoming for you guys over in Atlanta. So I do want to get kind of what the feel is around the program kind of going into this game. Obviously, it's going to be, a packed house. And I do believe Georgia Tech's going to have some kind of jersey theme as well. So just what's the general feel around the program kind of going into this game?
So they're honoring the 2014 Orange Bowl team. It's homecoming, like you said. There's a concert. They have a block party concert before. Big Boy from Outkast is playing the concert at probably like 9:30 in the morning to 10 or whatever it is, which is probably the earliest that dude's ever been up in his life since he was a kid.
Right.
Yeah, I think everyone thought it was going to be like an 8 p.m. game or 7:30 or something. So there's a lot of stuff that was sort of lined up with that. And then with everything that happened in the league and how unstable it's been, I think that it kind of pushed this game to be more of a prime ESPN game with Miami doing well and kind of the interesting storylines and stuff with the game. So, yeah, there's a lot going on this week. And then, obviously there's a lot of questions about Tech and where they're at. And they've lost all these games, but they've all been real close. They gave Louisville a win basically with unforced errors. The offense just sputtered out with the backup and the second backup at Virginia Tech in the last game. And then, Notre Dame, they gave a good push on, but again, playing without your starting quarterback is tough and against a team like that. So it'll be interesting. This is a very different matchup because they haven't played, in my mind, a team that's as good offensively as Miami yet. And Georgia Tech hasn't been scoring a lot of points. And then you have the contrast in styles, which is Georgia Tech tries to like kind of grind it out and speed the game up with chewing clock and stuff. And Miami's whole thing is kind of being quick and scoring. And the one thing I talked about with a lot of people, and I've been able to watch most of Miami's games this year, just how they line up and stuff with TV, and it's fascinating because the way I described it on, I think on X was like they like kind of toy with teams. It seems like in the first half of games a lot, and then kind of charge in the second half and pull away. And it'll be interesting because this is not a great game for that if it's going to be 8-9 possessions or something and not 11-12 or less. So that gets interesting. Obviously, what happened last year, I'm sure looms large for the Miami people, and they're going to be pissed off
Yeah.
about that. So yeah, there's a lot riding on this game, and obviously Miami. You guys, I'm sure are waiting for the fans are probably waiting for the other shoe to drop because that's what it's been for the last 20 years or whatever. Like are they going to screw this up? It's all lined up. Clemson lost. Like you're literally like have the easiest path right to go to the ACC championship game right now, and you just have to hold on and win the games you're supposed to win. And so I think it's going to be real interesting to see how these teams play. All the pressure in my mind's on Miami in this game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like you said, Miami has failed in these situations in years past, and I think a lot of fans are still maybe skeptical of Miami really kind of finishing the job and finishing this season undefeated to go to the ACC championship game. But there are other fans that are very confident and feel like this is a different team. They're preaching a 1-0 mentality every week, and that seems to be permeating throughout the entire team and the entire building over there at Coral Gables. So it will be interesting to see how not only how they perform in this game, but for the last uh, three total games as well. So next, I wanted to speak about just the quarterback situation. You kind of alluded to it as well. Haynes King, the dynamic quarterback for Georgia Tech, has been out with an injury. So, kind of wanted to know, like, do you expect him to play for this game, or is there a possibility? And just the quarterback situation overall. How do you feel about it with him being out the last couple of games?
So it's interesting because like Haynes got hurt, and then his backup Zach Pyron got hurt too. They have similar injuries on opposite shoulders. Zach's not on his throwing shoulder, but Haynes was on his throwing shoulder. I have thought from the jump when Haynes got hurt, the timeline I had heard from the jump was sort of this game. They were hoping to have him back. Brent Key has been very cagey about what's going on with his quarterback. So obviously he doesn't, because there are three kind of, they're similar but very different, like in what you have to prepare for. Haynes is obviously his legs will be rested, which will be huge for him because he runs so well. Um, what does his arm look like if he plays? Zach's been more of kind of the middle ground guy that can run and pass well. He played really well 2 years ago against Miami and famously broke his collarbone in that game and then threw a pick when they were going in to score to go up
Yeah.
because he didn't know his collarbone was broke. He went back to throw, or was this one, and threw the
Wow.
ball. It went like straight up in the air because he had no idea his collarbone was broken because of adrenaline. And then Aaron Philo, the true freshman, who's like the top passer in Georgia as a senior in high school. So it's an interesting dynamic at play, and if Haynes King plays, is there rust? He wasn't throwing the ball great before. Obviously, won the game last year. He didn't play well at all in that game. Wasn't throwing the ball well. Miami's defense did a good job against him. And what's fascinating to me about this too is like Miami's strength has been run defense, and Georgia Tech's strength has been run offense and not throwing the ball. So you have sort of the opposites there too. My gut is I wouldn't be shocked to see Haynes King play. I just don't know where he's at physically, like in terms of his injury is more of like a comfort pain level kind of thing than it's not like a structural kind of injury. So I think it'll be interesting if he plays. I just don't know where he's at, and I think that's what they're trying to determine this week too. Like, is he comfortable enough to go play a full game or not? And that gets down to the individual. I wouldn't be shocked to see multiple quarterbacks. Like, there could be all kinds of stuff in this game. So I think they're going to throw the kitchen sink at Miami in terms of just trying to come up with finding something that'll work against that defense.
Yeah, well, we'll see what quarterback trots out on the field for the first series for the Yellow Jackets on Saturday afternoon. But from what you've seen so far, like, do you think the backups, even if the backups do play, do you think they have a chance to pull off the upset, without Haynes King?
So it'd be interesting. Zach hasn't thrown the ball great this year. He played pretty well against Notre Dame. And then Aaron Philo was just like spinning the ball really well when he came in. He's a big arm guy, and he's the handpicked guy from the OC, right? They got Haynes King out of the portal, and Zach they inherited the offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner. So Aaron Philo is literally the guy that they wanted for this offense, right? Like So it'll be interesting to see what that all looks like if you start getting into playing a true freshman, or if you're playing Zach or Haynes. Like, what does that look like? So I don't know. I'm they've just been really wildly inconsistent on offense at times this year. The big thing in the past year was in 2023 was explosives and hang on them, and that hasn't really been the case this year. It's been much more structured drives where you just kind of drive down the field, or they're getting a lot of 3-and-outs. So avoiding that situation, the defense is much better. That's probably the biggest difference between this Georgia Tech team and the one a year ago. Is I think they're much better defensively. I think they're better than Duke is defensively overall. And they played well the last 2 weeks without their Mike linebacker, who's a quarterback of the defense, um, and held Notre Dame pretty well in check a lot of that game, and then um, held Virginia Tech in check for the almost entire second half of that game.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up those two games because I do want to kind of hear about, kind of what went wrong, I guess, for the Yellow Jackets in those last two games against, Notre Dame and Virginia Tech. They definitely struggled offensively, for sure. But if you can pinpoint just what those teams did well against Georgia Tech in those last two games.
It was bottling up the run. They made them one-dimensional both games. I think they might have like 40 yards rushing in the Notre Dame game with the backs and stuff, and then Virginia Tech did a good job with that too. There were one or two longer runs. They just were not able to string together successful drives. And Zach came out, played really well on the first couple drives, and then was really bad for a stretch, and they pulled him, and then put Aaron in, and then they just couldn't get in the end zone. The time and all that other stuff kind of factored into it. And that was the first time that kid was playing in a really hostile environment. So they've looked really out of sorts on offense at times this year. It's not been, offense carried them last year, and it's not been the case this year. And the defense has turned out to be the strength over which was really unexpected, and the offense has struggled. So, if they can get their offense in gear, I think they got a chance. But like that's a big if. And they gave up a fake punt and a fake field goal in the Notre Dame game and a pick six to spot them some points. Virginia Tech, they just couldn't get in the end zone. They kicked two field goals and then stalled out on a couple different drives where would get to like midfield and couldn't get any further down the field. Those are the things that I think they're trying to figure out and correct. And the other thing with Georgia Tech is they've been besieged with injuries. Their running back room is pretty depleted. You've been playing without your starting quarterback the last two games, and then their tight end position was decimated by injuries. They lost their starting tight end before the season even started, and his backup or the number two guy has been hurt, and the third guy has been out like the last three games, but the number two came back. It's just been a mess. And so, a lot of the things I think they had planned to for the offense just haven't come together. The guy that they thought would be the number two running back's been hurt a lot too. So, um, I think that it'll be, tough sledding for them to be consistent moving the ball, but um, they got to figure out something that's going to work, because that's what's killing them right now is going 3-and-out on offense a lot.
Yeah, that will definitely not work against the Hurricanes because Miami comes into this game with still the top offense in college football. So the faster they can get on the field, the faster they will be able to score the football. I do want to ask about what Georgia Tech kind of did well, because at one point this team was 5-2, and just maybe still thinking that they could be in contention for the ACC championship game. But after the two losses, of course, that probably a distant memory now. But what was working for Georgia Tech in those first five wins um, for the Yellow Jackets?
I think they were one of the biggest things and the biggest change probably from last year is they've limited turnovers a lot. Haynes King had 16 picks last year and a couple of fumbles, and has like I think he has one pick this year. Zach's thrown one, and Philo threw one that wasn't really a pick. It bounced off a receiver's hands into a defender at the end of that game. But they've gotten out of that, like turning the ball over like crazy, and that's been huge for them. And that was what was kind of working. And they should have been 6-1 really. The Syracuse game was the only game they really like lost, and they almost came back and won that game. The Louisville game, they spotted them like 17 points. They had a blocked field goal return for a touchdown. They fumbled out of their own end zone for a touchdown, and then missed like a couple different kicks in that game to spot Louisville a bunch of points. Um, they outplayed Louisville in that game and lost. Notre Dame beat them very soundly. That was like they won very soundly. Virginia Tech, they just didn't play. They just couldn't move the ball. So yeah, it's been kind of interesting. They've been kind of messing around with everybody. They really haven't beat anybody soundly in the league. Obviously, you're showing the clip from the North Carolina game. They blew a 10-point lead in that game. That was a game where Haynes King got hurt in the fourth quarter. They put in Zach Pyron, and we're just trying to kind of run the clock out and not running probably enough offense, and allowed North Carolina to come back down 10 late, and then scored on a simple give up the middle. Which was very funny because it was against their former head coach, who's now the defensive coordinator at North Carolina, Jeff Collins. Um, yeah, it's just been special teams was bad. They fired the special teams coach, in the middle of the season, and that's improved now. But it was okay the first couple games. It's just everything's been a little off this season. I don't know what it is. It's just like the mojo they had last year is not there. It's pretty much most of the same players. They just haven't quite put it together for whatever reason. And they had a couple games here. Obviously, Miami's gonna be really tough, and then they play NC State on Thursday night, and then they play Georgia to end the season. So they need to. One of the next two are probably their best shot in terms of just historically looking at it. And is Miami due for a clunker? That's I think what Tech fans are hoping for. I wonder about playing at noon. Does that impact Miami a little bit more than even Georgia Tech? Because it's not going to be probably quite as electric. And I've found that noon road games are a little harder for teams to get up for sometimes. So we'll see. And obviously everything rides on Cam Ward for Miami too. Like when he plays like he's capable of, then he's great. But every once in a while he does something real crazy. So
Yeah.
that's the thing that scares me when you watch them play. It's like he does a lot of like improvisation where it's like like he could take a really bad hit here or put the ball in danger or whatever. So those are the things. I think whoever wins the turnover battle probably wins the game. I think that it'll probably be a little bit lower scoring than some of these other Miami games just because of the possession thing. But I don't feel great about Georgia. This is probably the least optimistic I've been about a Georgia Tech Miami game in a while
Mm.
on paper.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, Cam Ward does, provide some no, 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 yes, yes, yes moments a lot. I wouldn't say a lot, but, he gives you at least
In his
one.
moments, he has those moments in every game where he does that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's fun to watch, man. He's been really fun to watch this
He
season.
is he is really entertaining.
Yeah, he's must see TV, and it's been a joy to watch him play football this season. It's been kind of a dream season for the Miami Hurricanes overall, especially with the mediocre seasons that this fan base has kind of gone through these past couple of years. Um, and just to see them just be in this position right now seems surreal for a lot of fans and for a lot of us covering the team as well. I do want to talk about some playmakers for Georgia Tech as well. You guys got one guy who is from Miami, in Malik Rutherford as well. Very familiar with his game. Well, what are some of the playmakers on both sides of the ball that fans should be aware of going into this game?
So on offense for Malik Rutherford is their most sure receiver. He He was part of the reason they lost to Virginia Tech last week. He was sick in the game. There was like food poisoning or stomach bug or something. He had 2 drops. He never dropped. He had like 1 drop going into the game. He had 2 drops and key fourth downs for them in the Virginia Tech game. But he's been like their most reliable guy the last 2 years. Great slot receiver. A little guy plays much bigger than he is. Eric Singleton, the outside receiver, can fly. Really difficult to cover. When he gets in space, is electric. He also returns kicks. Jamal Haynes, the running back, the clip he showed on the 68-yard touchdown, if he can make that one cut and make a guy miss, he's a home run threat every time he touches the ball. And obviously Haynes King if he plays, is huge because he is both really dynamic with his arm and his feet and can run. He runs like a running back at quarterback when he wants to run. So those are the sort of main guys on offense. And then defensively, Romello Height's been playing really well for them. The 2 D tackles, Zeke Biggers and J.J. Vandenberg, are pretty dynamic, those 3 guys up front. And then, the 2 corners have played really well this year, Warren Burrell and Amari Harvey. And they've been on an island a lot. I think the key matchup in this one's probably the nickel position versus Restrepo. And can they guard him? That would probably be either Rodney Shelley or Saeed Gibbs or Omar Daniels. Omar Daniels missed the VT game with an injury. Saeed got hurt in the VT game. Rodney Shelley's pretty capable of covering guys, but will sometimes blow one and give up a big play. So those are sort of the things I'm looking at as you kind of look at that and guys to watch.
Nice. All right, so when it's all said and done, Kelly, between the Yellow Jackets and the Hurricanes, well, let me just point out that Miami is an 11-point favorite. I usually ride with home dogs, if I were a betting man. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But if I were, I usually ride with the home dogs. But Miami's been covering by just by a slim margin in these last couple of games. So when it's all said and done on Saturday afternoon, what do you think the scoreboard will read at Bobby Dock Stadium?
The number that pops in my head right now is like, I haven't really thought about this much yet, is like 35-17 Miami. Like, that's like my first kind of instinct. I haven't thought about it as much as I probably would before making a pick later in the week. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit lower scoring than some of these other games just based on how Georgia Tech plays. Especially if it's raining. I think Miami might also pull back a little bit too. Just because you're not going to want to sling it around quite as much if it's pouring out. But we don't know that it's going to rain or not. That's the beauty of weather in the South. It can change in a heartbeat. But
tell me about it.
yeah, I just feel like maybe that's like I don't think it's going to be ugly. Georgia Tech, if they play well, has a chance to upset them. I don't love the matchup for them right now with where they are. So that would be my gut feeling because I think they're going to have to throw the football to win the game. And they haven't been consistent with that this year. So that makes me favor Miami in this game.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's like, when I look at this Miami Hurricanes team, and if anybody is following the team, they kind of know that the weakness of this team is the defensive backfield. And they have a tendency to give up big plays, and they have since game 1 of this season. They've been giving up big plays, and it seems it's because of lapses in that defensive backfield. And now you've lost another player last week in Jadice Richards. So, and he was actually having a really good game last week against Duke. So now you're in a situation where you might have to play Reese Powell at the nickel and play another freshman, Saquon Patterson, the 5-star from a local high school here at Chaminade. You may have to start him at safety. And you may also see the transfer of De'Ami Hill at the other corner position. So I'm concerned there, especially if Haynes King does play. I just feel like that kind of changes the whole dynamic of this game. So I think I'm going to give you like two predictions. Because if Haynes King plays, I feel like the Yellow Jackets will be scoring some points here. Based on what I just shared. But if he doesn't play, I think Miami's going to just pin their ears back and really cause a lot of pressure. And then the other factor is if um, Tech can stop the run. Kelly, and let me ask you, Kelly, how have they really done stopping the run this season?
They've been pretty solid. They kind of held Amari Hampton in check a little bit in that game. The main game where they struggled with run defense was the first game against Florida State in Dublin, and really since then they've been pretty solid in run defense. They tend to get occasionally caught on explosives and stuff more than anything else. They'll give up a run here and there, but they're not giving up a ton of big chunk runs. They play similar sort of to Duke, I guess would be the way I would describe it. Obviously, the DC came from Duke last year, and I think Manny just kind of kept some of the stuff they were doing, and so there's some similarities. If you were to compare those two teams, I would say that Tech's quarterback play is better than Link Murphy. I don't think is very good. Um, so that's probably the biggest difference between those two teams right now. Like if you were looking at like comparing it to the Duke game, right? So yeah, I think that run defense has been pretty solid. So I, they've been kind of solid all around. They started getting to the quarterback the last couple of weeks. That's been sort of the biggest difference for them defensively. Started to get more sacks and pressures as Santucci, the defensive coordinator, has gotten more comfortable with his personnel and stuff. So I think that's where you kind of look at all of this. But I'm
Yeah,
sure that the thing that'll be interesting to me too is like they're playing with house money in the game. So do they do things they don't normally do, and more aggressive with blitzes and things like that,
yeah,
um, and maybe try to get to Cam Ward. That's tough because he'll spin out of sacks and stuff. He's been very good at that. So that's sort of the rub, and then giving up the QB runs if you do get into too much of that too. They've been exposed a few times on that as well, just getting not caging well and letting guys kind of slip out of the pocket. That happened in the Louisville game a little bit with
yeah,
Slough, who's not a great runner. So yeah, I'm like super curious about this, but I feel like the run defense has been pretty solid. Obviously, they'll have a tall task. Miami has two really good running backs, and I watched a lot of Damian Martinez at Oregon State because their games would always be on at night when I was like back in the hotel working or back at my house working. So it's funny because like they played DJU the first game of the season. I was like, well, I've seen DJU play. Like I watched all the Oregon State games last year too, on
yeah.
Pac-12 After Dark, and then
Right.
seeing him play at Clemson, and then Damian I saw a lot last year, so I was pretty familiar with him too.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that being said, I feel like Miami's going to break off some big runs here and there, and if that run game gets going, I don't see Georgia Tech really kind of stopping this Miami offense. I mean, no defense has stopped it yet, so I don't see it stopping here in Atlanta. So yeah, the other side of the ball, I think, like I said, if Haynes King plays, I could see them scoring 24 points maybe. I see Miami scoring anywhere from 38 to 45 points a game, and they're averaging about 42 points a game this season. So right around their average, I think it's going to be a 45-24 game if Haynes King plays. If he doesn't play, I still think they put up around 45, but I think Georgia Tech does scores maybe around 13, maybe 13 points is kind of where I'm going there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
So I'm trying to think. Have they? What was the most points they've given up since Brent's been the coach? Oh, Clemson last year they gave up 42 because they threw a bunch of picks. Haynes King threw a bunch of picks in that game. 38 to BC. Yeah, I just think 40 seems like a lot, but Ole Miss game last year. Yeah, I mean this isn't dissimilar to the game they played at Ole Miss last year. With Ole Miss was really good on offense, and It was interesting. That was a game that was a one-score game in the fourth quarter that ended up being 48-23. So you just and Miami did that with Duke last week, right? Like it was,
Right.
once it was a super tight game in the fourth quarter when I was like watching it, and then they pulled away. So I just wonder if there's enough time to like put up that many points. I would be shocked if it gets over if it gets over 38. I would be pretty surprised with just the pace of play and stuff. But yeah, I could see where you're coming from.
Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out on Saturday. Kelly Quinlan joining me from Jackets Online, part of the Rivals.com network, here for our Scouting the Opponent episode. Thanks for joining me again today.
No problem. Thanks, Marcus.
That's going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Kings County. Also subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Until the next episode.